cat hit the reheat.
Oh, sorry, bud. Looks like you do have to tell me twice. As in lightning strikes twice. That's what we're doing now. It's super fast, hyper condensed, one topic apiece, 5 minutes per topic. The other person does not know what the person before them shall bring up. So, what shall ye be bringing up for me?
Well, I guess mine's kind of a philosophy-esque sort of thing. And it kind of I started thinking about it with all the LA fires going on and basically whole swaths of land, well, all these properties totally wiped out. And but and I've heard it said before that things are just things. And what's your opinion on that? Are things just things?
Um, nah, I think that's kind of bullshit. Like, there's definitely like personal value that you can ascribe to certain things. They'll remind you of something, um, and so on and so forth. That said, it's not really ever like equal to a human life in comparison. But
Yeah,
I also don't see any reason to compare the two unless you're talking about like running into a burning building to save something. You're going to go for the living being, of course. But
yeah, exactly. That's true.
yeah. But
Um,
apart from that, like I don't see any problem in ascribing a great deal of value to an item.
Oh, for
Um,
sure. Because I mean, it could be family heirlooms or something.
mhm, mhm.
It can be things that you made yourself, that is one of a kind, right? That maybe
Right.
represents part of, like, I can imagine if all the music that I created got erased somehow. Well,
Oh
that is
yeah.
my life story in
I
song format.
I have like a fear of that.
Yeah, I do too. Even though I have it replicated in several places, it's still, but yeah, and it's like it represents memories. Even you could have stuff that's really rare too, that maybe was a once in a lifetime find or something. Or maybe it's just like, hey, you worked really hard and to save up to buy this thing, and now poof, it's gone. Or to build a thing, right, like a house or whatever.
Right.
um and that, and even like a house, for instance, like, yeah, okay, you could build a house again, but they don't build houses like they used to. So like, yeah, insurance will cover building another house, but it's never going to be the same as that old craftsman house, or maybe the one that your grandpa built himself or something. Like,
Yeah.
you can't bring that back. And it's like, uh, so yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah, you financially you could get back most of what you got, although maybe not necessarily all of it. Uh,
Hmm.
but if, man, I don't even know. I would feel absolutely crushed if that happened.
Right. Yeah, it's really unfortunate that's happening and there's a lot of people that think like, oh, well, they're rich anyway. Like I don't have any sympathy for them and it's like, well, I mean like they didn't do anything to deserve this. Like
Exactly. Yeah.
in particular, like I can see like, oh, like boo hoo, I'm sorry you lost $500 on something. Like that's one thing, but like your entire life and memories and
Yeah.
where
Just
your
just
kids
because
grew
they're
up and
just because they're rich doesn't make them immune to feelings
right.
and being human. and
Yeah.
and that's and I think we should
Except
still
for the
be
lizard
sympathetic.
people.
The lizard, yes, lizard
Yeah.
people, they can go fuck themselves. And you could say, okay, well, I think people tend to like quantify things,
Uh-huh.
where it's like it's a monetary thing, like, oh well, you have the money to bring it back, but like I said, I outlined some of this stuff. It's like, yeah, you could but you can't, because there's one of those things, or it's something I made or commissioned to have made or something, so it's one of a kind, and no matter how much money you have, it can never come back again. And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and even though it's like, I agree that human lives obviously are much higher value than anything, no matter how rare or special it is, it's still like, well, yeah, but there's a lot of things that are really close, really, really
Yeah.
close. Like, imagine if, I don't know, the Mona Lisa was destroyed or something. It's like, shit, that's a big deal. Or I don't know, like, US troops went into the museum in Baghdad and like destroyed a bunch of priceless artifacts from the origin of like human civilization.
Yeah. Well, and then on the flip side, like Notre Dame had that fire not too
Mhm.
long ago, and they just kind of like when stuff like that happens, oftentimes they'll just kind of refurbish it.
Yeah.
So there are old structures that, if you go with that whole like ship of Theseus thing or whatever,
Mhm.
like is it even still like that old castle or
Ah,
is it, like
that's a good question. Well, and I think maybe it's representative of something. It's symbolic, and so
Mhm.
even if it's not exactly the same thing made of exactly the same materials, it still stands as a symbol. Um,
Right. Now,
exactly.
if they did it in exactly the same like technology at
Mhm.
the time of its creation,
That
that
would be cool. Oh man,
yeah,
that would be
that'd be
awesome.
a little bit more like, oh, okay, I can buy that.
Mhm. Oh damn, perfect timing. That was perfect timing. Oh man, how good was that? Jeez. Well, now it's your turn.
Okay. Um, uh, Trying to pick between two I have on my list here. Uh, I've had this on the list a while. I think I'll go with this one. So is skipping a tip protesting the unfair wage of servers or just screwing them over? Like
Oh man, well, like in the States in particular, because that tends to be much more common here than elsewhere. Uh,
mhm,
I mean, yeah, well, see, I mean, yes, maybe tipping can be seen as a form of compensation for like lower pay. And I know a lot of people who work in food service kind of things, and they make a lot of money on tips. But it should also,
well, it really depends.
yeah, it does. Yeah, if you have the boobage, you can definitely make the moolah. Um,
Hmm.
whereas people like me, I come home at the end of the day with like $10 in tips. Um, but it so well, but it also kind of also serves a purpose to encourage good service, I suppose. That like it's a reward for doing more than just what everybody would expect. Like so there's two sides of that. Maybe a small tip to be the compensatory thing, if that's a word. And then you can add a little
Compensatory.
more. Yeah. And you can add a little more if they go above and beyond. Like somebody's really attentive, really helpful, whatever, then okay, you could add to that and give them a little bigger tip to be like, hey, here's your reward for doing something special.
Hmm.
Um,
But
so
I think like I think what made me put this on the list is I think I heard of this movement where people are just like, because prices are getting so ridiculously high anyway, and they're not really getting like a livable wage. They're just like, fuck it, I'm not going to tip, and that's going to be like my protest, and that should send a message to the restaurant. But like the restaurant still gets paid for their food, and
yes.
so
And they don't necessarily see that money, so
right,
it doesn't
right,
really, it's not noticeable or impactful to the
yeah,
restaurant. Maybe a really small restaurant where it's kind of a community sort of thing, word will
right.
get
Like,
around. But those are the ones where it's like, well, that's a different story.
well, the
But
only
like,
way that would be effective is if people were just like, okay, I'm not gonna be a server anymore, or like nobody wants the job anymore,
mhm.
which, that involves then people who, where that is their job, they have to give that up in
Yeah, which
protest,
even if
so
even if it's not quite enough, at least it's something. So it's like, oh, what? So you're just gonna give up your job as a server, and maybe that's what you've done your whole life. You don't have any experience in other fields. What are you gonna do?
right.
It's kind of a almost like a bit of a black hole or a trap or something, right? In that regard.
Yeah. And then, like here in Germany, the tipping culture is way different. Like it's
Mhm.
an insult to leave more than like a euro.
Yeah.
It
Mhm.
doesn't matter what you spend or how long you stay there.
Mhm.
Like it's just a little bit extra to put in their
You,
pocket, you know?
some places it's an insult if you tip at all.
Yeah.
Like it just depends on the culture, really. And yeah, I, it's sort of like the remember when gas prices started going up, and it was like people were like, well, if it hits $2 a gallon, I'm just not buying gas, right?
Hmm.
Like as if that's possible to do, right?
Right.
How, okay, you know, how are you going to get to work and whatnot, get around town and stuff? And people just sucked it up, and then they were like, well, if it hits $3 a gallon, I'm just not buying gas. And it's like, okay, there's a handful of people doing that. It's not really going to be noticeable. Exxon is not going to be like, oh, there's 6 people in Tacoma that just aren't buying gas anymore. What are we going to
Yeah.
do? You know?
Yeah.
And
Boycotts almost never work. Like
mhm.
it's
It has to
way
be,
too
it has to be huge in scale to
right.
actually, or like,
Or
you know,
small in scale what you're boycotting. Like
yeah,
yeah.
or it needs a lot of attention. So it's
Mhm.
like front page news everywhere, where like the companies are like, oh shit, that we look kind of bad here. We better change things. So you can
Hmm.
affect change, but yeah, you got to go about it right. And just simply, oh, I'm just not going to buy that thing. It's not going to change a single thing.
No.
Um, and so yeah, I think like maybe a different tactic, pressuring companies. Well, one of the problems is restaurants are already operating on pretty thin margins as it is. So like
Yeah.
it's just kind of a lose lose situation for everybody. It's almost like no matter what we do, restaurants are gonna just kind of go away at some point in the future, unless something changes. Which who knows? You
Yeah.
know. Oh, damn it. Well,
Oh
why don't you
man.
finish your last thought?
Well, I was gonna say, yeah, things do need to change because all this like entertainment stuff, you know, like music and dining out and all this stuff is gonna be priced out of existence. And what's the point of living? Like we just work and
Yeah.
sleep, and that's
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
You know?
exactly. Like, yeah, and that's maybe that's something, a point of encouragement for everybody. Like, hey, let's work together to figure out a way to affect change. Because it's possible to affect change. It's just you need enough people. You know, it's like you can't fight a war by yourself.
Free Luigi.